Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference, and especially Kalyan Vishwanathan for making the arrangements for me to come here. It's an honor. And it's an honor to share the podium with Madhu Kishwar. And I came all the way from Virginia. Wow. I want you to know that. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Now, before I get going here, I want to say that clearly all of you, or most of you at least, have migrated from India to the United States. And you took a lot of trouble. Either you or your early family members took a lot of trouble to come here. You took the plane, you had to move, and so on. So you migrated here, but I transmigrated here. So don't be fooled by the color of my skin, okay? Let's just make this perfectly clear, okay? Good. So, back in the early 60s, the 1960s, I was aware that immigration laws lifted their restrictions for Indian nationals to come here to this country. And at the time, many teachers from India came to the United States during that very sort of very strange period of American history. But nevertheless, there was a great influx of Indian migration to this country. And I saw over the years, over the decades, the building of great temple edifices, beautiful architectural feats gradually rise on the American landscape. And I saw greater and greater participation on the part of American Hindus to come forward and help build these communities. I saw all of this. But sadly, while other traditions, namely that of Buddhism and Jainism, and other traditions on the American landscape, while they were funding positions in the American Academy, funding chairs, endowed centers of multi-millions of dollars, representing the intellectual pursuit and understanding and appreciation of those traditions, those representing Hindu Dharma traditions were not really being represented nearly as fully as these other traditions. And so I applaud the effort of Kalyan Vishwanathan and the Dharma Civilizations Foundation for really beginning to address this kind of lacuna, a lacking, because as much as we have these beautiful temples of worship, we need to build a temple of knowledge. So those in America can appreciate, yes, a temple of knowledge will allow the rest of America to appreciate what is going on in those temples. Otherwise, we will remain isolated from the rest of American culture. And there are great gifts that India has to offer the American and Western world. So today I've tried to put together some of those gifts. Now, the gifts of India are way too numerous to enumerate them here. So I've just done a little bit, let's see if this works for me. It does indeed. I've tried to focus on perhaps five gifts of Hindu Dharma traditions. 5 gifts. And they would be generally on the themes of reality, divinity, insight, dialogue, and love. So I'm going to move through these rather quickly in the interest of time. Some slides will be quicker than others. But let's visit some of these rich, rich treasures that come from India. In an earlier clip that we saw, Narendra Modi, he talked about my idea of India. He kept repeating that, right? My idea of India. And then he quoted from the Rig Veda. He quoted from the Upanishads. He quoted from the Bhagavad Gita. I think I perceived a Mahabharata quote in there too. Anyway, he quoted from these texts that we all very much, with which we are all very much familiar. But really, it's not so much Narendra Modi's idea of India, it's India's idea of India, isn't it? And what I appreciate about Narendra Modi is that he's bringing India back into itself. So I think that's really important. By the way, don't I look like the younger brother of Narendra Modi? I just felt like I needed to point that out. I just felt compelled.
Just a few pounds lighter.
A few pounds. Yeah, I'm getting there though. Okay, but reality. Let's talk about reality, the way Hindu Dharma traditions have beautifully brought the idea of reality to the foreground in a way that Western intellectuals and philosophers and professors have a hard time grasping. A vision of reality, the infinite, the unlimited, the supreme fullness of being. Sometimes the terms Sat, Purnam, Brahman are used to indicate or express what these are. Now, I don't have a lot of time, so we're going to move into this. This famous Rig Vedic quote, I heard it with some of our members here. I heard Narendra Modi quote it, but it is also something very popularly understood or attempted to be understood in the West. And there are mistranslations of this text. So again, the careful study, Swadhyaya, as Patanjali called it, a careful study of these texts brings out their treasures. So let's look at this text. What does it mean? There is one ekam, true reality, Sat, about which vibrant persons in various ways speak. You see, this is a very common translation of this Vedic adage. Truth is one, paths are many. Now, while this has a little bit of a romantic feel to it, it's not actually what the text is saying. And this is why students of Hindu Dharma traditions is essential. So, first of all, there is no word for truth in this text. There is no word satya. The word is sat. There is no word for paths, as marga or pantha or so on. So this is not a correct translation. And besides, it's a little off-putting if you go up to somebody and say, truth is one, because they start wondering, well, wait a minute, what's your idea of truth? Right? It puts someone on the defensive. But who can refute they were all in the same reality? Right? So it's beautiful. The way it is in the Vedic text is exquisite. And it takes careful study to bring these things up. Here's another mistranslation. Truth is one. Sages call it by many names. Again, the assertion of truth. You see, the word truth is the same as the word satya. It's that which we grasp of what is reality. That is truth. It's the grasping of what is true reality. It itself cannot be conflated, or should not be conflated, but it is too often conflated with absolute reality. These are subtle distinctions, but they have great ramifications. So truth is one, sages called by many names. There's no word for names. Sages is a little too particularized. Vipra means inspired. Vipra means literally shaking. Inspired persons is a better, more broader, sort of a broader way to understand it. So this is a powerful adage, Rig Vedic adage, which has great implications for other facets of the gifts that I'm going to present later. It also has implicitly the ideas of Om Tat Sat, famous blessing mantra of bija mantras. There is one true reality, which refers to Sat, which is expressed variously, that is to say, Tat, by vibrant persons, and that is the Omkar, and we're going to get into that a little later. This is a very famous passage, invocational passage from the Upanishads. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Ashishyate. So again, the fullness of reality is there. The fullness of reality is here. From fullness of reality comes the fullness of reality. Now this is a little abstract to a lot of those who may read it from a Western perspective. But from the ancient Indic vision, this is a celebration of what unites everything, and at the same time, what is divine otherness. And both are celebrated in India in a great way. We'll show that in a minute. So you have Om Tat Sat. You have, in some sense, the expression of complete unity in the Sat, the fullness of being, and at the same time, you have particularity, individuality, a discrete divine being or otherness in Tat. And the is something that we'll reveal, I think, next. I'm not sure. Let's see what we've got. Well, not quite yet, but we'll get there, okay? Promise. Divinity. Let's look at divinity. A polymorphic, dualistic monotheism. It's complicated. In the West, we have monotheism. At least Western traditions think they have monotheism. I'm not sure they do. But the point is this. Imagery in Abrahamic traditions, imaging the divine, is something that is prohibited, right? The aniconism of Abrahamic traditions colors Western scholars in their vision as many images of your Lord as your heart so desires and loves. For you have chosen your God, for whom you have the greatest love, and from whom you have received divine love and grace. For endless are the forms, Ananta Rupa, of your divine beloved, who embraces you now, whom you may now embrace. What a contrast, right? What a contrast. But how will people in the West understand this contrast? How will scholars not project their expectations of an Abrahamic God onto Hindu Dharma traditions? They've done it, even very fine scholars, and I'm going to show you this. And this is why the study of Hindu Dharma traditions is absolutely essential. Otherwise, again, we remain isolated. Ishwara, something that is typically translated as God, but you may not know, but 82% of Americans consider God the creator God. Okay, the creator. But as we all know, creation is the other side of destruction or dissolution, cosmic dissolution. Creation is something that's subcontracted out in Hindu traditions. It's not that impressive, right? And Brahma really gets the short end of the deal. There's no tradition that celebrates Brahma, okay? But he's there on his swan, and he's got his consort too, so he's fine. He's not troubled by that, but it's just not celebrated. So Ishwara, to translate it God is tricky. It really has two parts, this Isha and Vara. Isha means the divine center, and Vara, literally, denotatively means circumference, means the fullness of being. So Ishvara is the divine center of all reality. This really delivers the nature of divinity. See that? Atman, Brahman, again, two sides of the Isha and Vara. The core reality plus the whole of reality. And again, this is a very rich idea of divinity that the West has yet to understand. Saguna, Nirguna, you know, the divinity with attributes and without attributes. And Tat and Sat, finally. Okay, now, why am I showing you a picture of the Harvard Bridge? Now, I'm going to give you a little example. I'm going to use myself as an example of how Westerners think they understand Hindu Dharma traditions, but they don't. Okay? So I'm going to use myself as an example. Even though I am clearly a reincarnated, all of you had to pay for tickets. I just simply reincarnated. It's much cheaper, and I recommend it in the future. In any case. But still, with this American body, right, this Western body, in my days at Harvard, that's at the Center for the Study of World Religions, where I was a fellow, a resident fellow, a wonderful Indian gentleman from South India arrived. And his name was Dr. Gangadhara Siddhanta. He was a sweet little man. And he said one day to me, he said, Graham, would you take me to the Krishna temple? And I said, surely. He said, I said, on Sunday we can go. They have a nice program. I would be happy to take you. It's just over the river. You know, Cambridge is north of Boston, and you have to cross some bridge. So typically, I would go over this bridge. And so as we're driving through Cambridge, I said, Dr. Gangadhara, let me ask you something about Shaiva Siddhanta. In the end, when you attain moksha, what do you end up with? Shiva Nishkala or Shiva Sakala? Meaning mainly either Shiva with attributes, personal, or Shiva without attributes. He said, yes. Americans do not like that kind of response. Okay? And I didn't at the time. I said, Dr. Gangadhara, let me just rephrase the question. Okay? So I said, look, when you attain moksha, okay, right? You leave the body, you attain perfection. What do you end up with? Shiva Nishkala? Shiva Sakala? He said, Graham, yes, there's, and we're driving along Cambridge very calmly. I said, yes, there is Shiva Nishkala, Shiva Sakala, and yes, there is both. I said, no, you don't understand. Which one is better? Which one is higher? Right, so this is Graham speaking as American, not as the reincarnated Hindu that I actually am, right? So, he said, you see, Graham, there is the Nishkala and the Sakala. There is both. Right? At this point, I am getting really upset. And we are just about to cross this bridge. And I started shaking the wheel. I said, Dr. Gangadhara, if we went off this bridge right now, where will you end up? And I started, you can see the rail is not that high. I started shaking the car and we practically went off. He said, Shiva Nishkala. I said, thank you. Thank you. So I thought I was very clever. I forced the issue. I threatened the poor man's life. And I thought, finally, I got it. I know what he's really after, Shiva Nishkala. But actually, later throughout the years, as I delved more deeply into the tradition, there was a reason why he stayed on the wall. Because both are essential. Both are valuable. The Western tradition is very much black and white. And we can't tolerate anything that's a little, in between, a little achintya. We can't tolerate that sort of thing. So I threatened the poor man's life. I almost went off the bridge. We almost died together and ended up somewhere. And the point is that I really wasn't successful in understanding Dr. Bhagavath. So somehow, if he ever hears this talk, I'm going to apologize to him right now. And if anyone sees it, please let him know. So we have the developed Hindu traditions, and this beautiful phrase that everyone knows, Ishta Devata. You know where this originates? This originates in the Yoga Sutra. And I was on a panel with the best and revered Indologists in America. And they were claiming that there is no theism in the Yoga Sutra. And I was a respondent to these two revered Indologists. And I said, well, how, okay, so maybe you're bypassing the word Ishwara. But what about the phrase Ishta Devata? And they both turned to me in unison. One of these Indologists, by the way, was an elderly Indian lady who was a fine scholar, one of the finest. They both turned to me in unison and said, that is not in the Yoga Sutra. I thought I had lost my mind. So yes, I felt just like that. Just like that. I was crying, just like that, inside. And then I looked up on my little computer, thinking I must have lost my mind. It's got to be in there. And sure enough, it's right there. And I showed it to them. I handed over my computer, and they both turned a bright red color out of embarrassment. Again, we must, and I can't underscore this enough, but we must engage in a very serious Swadhyaya study of the Hindu traditions, the Hindu Dharma traditions. Because without this, even Hindu scholars themselves can overlook these things being unduly influenced by the Western Academy. And I've seen this many times. Ishwara, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, because it speaks for itself, and this will be familiar to most of you anyway. Ishwara, in one sense, contains the masculine and the feminine, but of course it subdivides to Purusha and Prakriti. And of course you get many different derivations from that, and I'm going to move in the interest of time. Again, the feminine and the masculine together becomes a six-pointed star. You can see how the traditions beautifully are expressed. And remember my little revised Decalogue statement. Create as many forms of the divine as your heart so wills. And of course we have, the triune cosmic divinities with their divine consorts, feminine counterparts. There's Brahma, he doesn't feel neglected, he's fine, no one has to start a tradition. There's Saraswati, his consort, of course Shiva, Parvati, and so on. So it is such a colorful tradition, but how to understand this? How to even understand that Krishna, yes, is an incarnation of Vishnu, as everyone knows. But what few scholars really understand is that Krishna emanates Vishnu. And that's explained in the Bhagavad Gita. But few people understand that Krishna comes from Vishnu, but Vishnu comes from Krishna. How do they understand this? This is something I speak about in my first book published by Princeton, Dance of Divine Love. So we have these beautiful traditions. And of course, I don't need to tell all of you who these great divinities are and how they proliferate. You can see how they proliferate into various Leela forms of the divine. Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman, and of course Krishna's famous Ras Leela. This is the Ras Mandala, something that I had commissioned, this painting. So dialogue, let's move into dialogue. The essential nature of dialogue. Dharmam samvadam. This is a phrase from the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, that is the great dialogue. Dialogue was something in India that was cultivated and matured into a fine art from ancient times on, from the earliest Upanishads to the Bhagavad Gita, and just even the Guru-Shishya relationship. So, from the kinds of, my study of dialogue in India compelled me to bring out what the gift of dialogue is for India, and how this could be something so greatly contributing to the world peace. If we only knew dialogue in the way that ancient India knows it, we would be in a much better place today. So while dialogue starts with the one reality, right? Ekam Sat, that's the first axis. You see how it surrounds everything. It encloses everything. And the second axis, notice this, the truth of religion, that's the Tat. So Ekam Sat, one reality, then Tat. The truth of religion comes to us, the worshiper. But if the worshiper just stays in the temple, then no more dialogue. See, axes 1 and 2 are not enough. But when the worshiper becomes a partner, you see that axis 3, a partner in dialogue, this becomes very significant. And the academic study of religion in the Hindu Dharma traditions allows us to become partners in dialogue. And through that kind of dialogue, that axis number 3, look at axis number 4. Even a greater disclosure of reality becomes something that we become filled with. And the Gita speaks about the value of dialogue, connection with other human beings. Manchitta magata prana bodhiyanta parasparam. Parasparam, bodhiyanta parasparam. That people, once we delve into our own traditions deeply, we go out and we share what we've got, and we cause each other to be enlightened. Bodhiyanta parasparam. You know that famous little story probably came from India, the 6 blind men and the elephant, right? This has gone through so many different traditions. Jainism talks about it, Buddhism talks about it, even parts of Islam talk about it. The 6 blind men. Well, you know, they engaged in dialogue. They each told each other, they told one another what they perceived, what they experienced, right? So the elephant is like the Sat. The elephant is the reality. And the Tat is what each blind man experienced in the, hello, there we go. Just shake it, it works. What each blind man experienced as the truth. That's where the truth is engaged. Our experience of reality that participates in reality. And then finally, the Om is what causes us to go deep within the core of our hearts. Insight. Okay, we're getting to the theme of insight here. The supreme secret of yoga. We will move into that, and this whole idea of karma, jnana, and bhakti as different forms of yoga. The beauty of the ancient Vedic tradition is that it recognized that human being consists of 3 essential constituent attributes. One of deepest feeling, bhakti, one of thinking or contemplation, jnana, and karma, acting. We are feeling, thinking, and acting creatures. Have you noticed? But when we come into this world, we are feeling creatures. Have you ever seen a little baby human? They don't do much, but they're feeling. They don't act much, and they don't think much, but they're feeling a lot, okay? Their bodies don't work, even their vision is not fully formed. So we start off as feeling creatures, and when we leave this world, when we are on our deathbeds, our bodies don't work very well, and it's not a time to start philosophizing. It's what is left in the heart. It's the shraddha that counts. When we break up that word, where one places one's heart, that is what one's faith is, according to the Gita, 17:3.